everyone, and welcome to Big Red Homestead. I'm Josh, that's Caleb, and today we have a very, very special guest, the man of the NCAA himself, Alex, aka the Gridiron Expert, and he's coming in today to drop some knowledge on us from all around college football. He covers on his channel literally the entire field of all football teams across the Power 5, outside the Power 5, and everything in between. Today, we're going to be going from top down here across college football, and we're going to start talking about the realignments, the Big Ten, the SEC, and talk about these Power 2 that's emerging, and then narrowing down to the Big Ten, some overall talk about the favorites in the Big Ten and some predictions there, and then into the breakout players for Nebraska, and finally landing the ship, Minnesota, Nebraska, this week. So it's going to be a fun time. Of course, first of all, definitely go support him, check him out. But Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you guys, man. I've been following you guys for a while. We were talking before the show. I think it's phenomenal what you guys are doing. We cover at the Gridiron Expert, kind of cover the entire field, but I have a lot of respect for the people that hone in on that one specific team. It gets some great insight. You guys have been a go-to source for me when it comes to doing Nebraska videos. So definitely appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Hey, I mean, yeah, we love to hear it. I mean, dude, we were just like we said before. I mean, with transfer portals nowadays, your job has gotten infinitely harder. I feel like ours has, to trying to figure out what's happening in the Big Ten, let alone what's happening around the country. So absolutely.
Yeah, mad
insane.
props.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
To say the least. Without further ado, let's start here at the beginning. We just want to hear your thoughts on what you think about conference realignment, how it's going to affect teams and their approaches, maybe even this season, or if definitely heading into this recruiting class and into the future. What are your thoughts, big picture, on the future of college football with these realignments?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of it. The one good side that if you're looking for a plus is we're going to get some phenomenal matchups, right? Getting teams like USC playing Penn State, Michigan and UCLA, Oregon, Penn State. I mean, there's so many great games that we're going to get. We got great rivalries already within the 14 teams that are there. Now you factor in the 4 new members that are coming in and maybe more later on. It's going to be great. Problem is, obviously the NCAA is a business. We know that. This is a business that needs money. It's all about the TV deals, the media rights deals, revenues, everything like that. You're going to have instances where we have Rutgers in New Jersey traveling to Los Angeles to take on USC and UCLA. And that's not good for anybody. Who wants to do that? So the days of conferences standing for geography, those days are gone, right? And the SEC is doing it too. SEC is guilty of it now. They're adding in Oklahoma and Texas. They're probably going to add more down the road when the ACC eventually dissipates. The Big 12's now bringing back Colorado, the Arizona schools. So we're going to get some great matchups out of it. It's great for these conferences when it comes to a money deal financially. It's great for them. But as fans and for the state of the game itself, I think it's a pretty bad deal.
You covering all of college football. I mean, those, again, the Liberties, Tulanes, like they're going to have a tough time just with recruiting players. Again, business finances. I mean, there's less now with bigger conferences. There's probably going to be more conference games, less non-con, and less money to go around to those other teams. What does this do to a team like Nebraska going forward?
It's a tough spot to be in for teams like a Nebraska, who recently, Nebraska's a blue blood program. Whatever anybody wants to tell you, despite recent,
amen,
they are a blue blood program, and I will continue to stand by that. So they've got that going for them, right? They've got the name brand going for them. They really aren't competing against any other programs within the state of Nebraska when it comes to recruiting, right? They are the top dog. But bringing in these bigger name brands such as USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, coming in from the Pac-12, and then obviously still going up against the teams that have already been there, like Ohio State, Michigan, guys like that. It's going to be a challenge for Matt Rhule and his new staff. You're not just competing against guys in the Midwest now. You always are trying to recruit the best players out there, regardless of where they are, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, whatever. But you're going to have to put more of an emphasis on there, and it's trying to beat out some of these top programs that traditionally haven't even been your rivals. I think it completely changes the approach of how every staff across the country is going to handle recruiting and how they're going to handle the future of their programs with this expansion. So I wouldn't say it's a good thing by any means, but it's one where if you have a great guy in place, and quite frankly, I believe Matt Rhule is the right guy in place, that it could end up working out for you in the end.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we had talked about was potentially the opportunity that it gave Nebraska on the recruiting front, especially in the South, considering that Nebraska would be the closest access point to debatably the most intense or most sought after conference. If you add in those 4 Pac-12 teams, suddenly this conference becomes pretty appealing. and for guys in Kansas City, St. Louis, Oklahoma State, or Oklahoma City, or Texas, Nebraska is that access point for the Big Ten. So there is an opportunity there. And with Matt Rhule coming from Baylor, having some of those connections already in Texas, there is some potential opportunity here for that Southern connection to really renew the pipeline to Nebraska as it used to be in the Big 12 in Nebraska's heydays.
I like what you said about Matt Rhule. He's already got great connections in Texas, right? He was phenomenal at Baylor, even a little bit on the East Coast too with his time at Temple. He's been known as a program builder. Anybody that has watched college football or has watched him over the course of his career knows what he's capable of. And I think he's going to do the exact same thing at Nebraska. So if he comes in and within the first couple of years of his tenure in Lincoln kind of restores Nebraska to what they should be, that's going to do wonders for him, especially recruiting in here in the South. Nebraska, I do feel like they are going to get back to that kind of that blue blood status, right? They're going to take the status away, but they're going to get back to being that relevant team in the Big Ten. They're going to get back to competing for championships that we unfortunately haven't seen these last few years. Once Matt Rhule gets them there, completely changes the game across the board.
Well, I was going to say that was one question that we talked about beforehand, was potentially what is your experience and your thoughts with the branding of Nebraska nationally, especially from being from the South as you are yourself? Like,
yeah, when you hear Nebraska, what do you think? Yeah, when you hear Nebraska football, what comes to mind?
They've had hit or miss success in the South with recruiting, especially when it comes to like Florida and areas like that, with guys who have come for a year and then left. So what are your thoughts overall on that?
First thing I hear when I think of Nebraska is like the 80s and 90s, right? You think of the golden days when they were, elite. You think of Osborne. You think of guys that made Nebraska who they are, right? They helped them achieve that blue blood status. Obviously, in recent years, you go back and you look. I grew up watching Nebraska a little bit more in the Big 12, right? I mean, obviously, most of my life they've been in the Big 10, but those Big 12 days are pretty nice, right?
The Callahan, the Pelini days, especially, right?
Pelini days, and I don't know what your take is. I always liked Bo Pelini. I really did. I thought I like the passion. I like the intensity. That's what I want in a coach, right? Sometimes his temper could have been a little too much.
Yeah, he had plenty of it.
He had quite a bit of it. Wasn't afraid to speak his mind, but I respected that. And I thought he actually, if you look at it, Nebraska really hasn't been the same since they fired Pelini. They've gone through a handful of coaches since then, but have never really been, competing for those division titles, competing for the conference championships, really since he departed or since they let him go, really. So that's obviously unfortunate deal. But I've had the benefit of being to Lincoln, benefit of being in their stadium, just not to an actual game. But I think of a passionate fan base, that's for sure. You hear all the time about, how many consecutive sellouts it's been for Nebraska. It's a ridiculous number that no one's going to top. And I respect that. There are a lot of teams out there, fan bases, that when their teams go through some struggles, they're not going to buy the tickets. Why would I go sit through a game that is meaningless if we can't go bowling, if the season's lost or whatever? Well, Nebraska's not like that. So I think that, to me, speaks one of people that don't like Nebraska are going to give them a little hard time for that. They're gonna take shots at them. But find me another fan base in the country that is that dedicated and that passionate. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult to come up with an answer.
Yeah. So overall, I think that can speak to the narratives that can seep through into the recruiting for Matt Rhule into the future. Realistically, people have pointed at Nebraska, and usually the doubters will say Nebraska can't win in the modern age because recruiting. And generally, to me, the counter has been, well, we've at least if you trust 24/7 or Rivals or ESPN, then we've out recruited the rest of the Big Ten West almost every single year for the last decade. It's just been a talent development problem, keeping guys in town. Where do you feel like Nebraska's best opportunity is moving forward when it comes to finding talent and developing talent?
5-star talent versus 5-star culture, right? That's been what I've kind of harped on for so long. And you see that a lot, like teams like a Texas, for example, that bring in
Texas A&M
every single year. Texas A&M is another great example, that bring in this elite talent, number one recruiting class, whatever, and then they don't pan out. Why? It's two reasons. One, they don't have a staff that can develop them. Two, it's because they don't have the culture in place. And I think that term culture gets overused quite a bit across all of sports, not just football, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
You have to have the people in place. You have to have the leadership in place to get these 5-star guys. They're coming in from wherever high school. Just because you're a great guy in high school doesn't mean you're going to be a great guy in college, great athlete in college. You come to get developed. You come to play at Nebraska, play at Alabama, play wherever, to learn under a coach, develop yourself, and get to that next level, which is the NFL, playing football as a career. That's what Nebraska is going to need to do. The transfer portal is great to an extent. I think there needs to be some regulations on that. I think it's definitely gotten way out of hand.
Yeah.
and the NIL deals, it's a little bit ridiculous. Another reason I think
Insane.
going in the wrong direction. But utilize the transfers when you can. Nebraska is going to, a lot of their season is going to hinge on a transfer this year, right? The play of Jeff Sims is going to dictate how good or bad this season can be. So I'm not against the transfer portal in that sense. Obviously, there's some pros and cons out of it. But bottom line is how you build a program, at least in college football this day and age, is not through the transfer portal. It's going to be going out, getting your guys, and develop them.
Yeah, man, that's what's interesting too. I mean, right now in the Big Ten West, there are debatably 7 new quarterbacks, but 6 that are new through the transfer portal. So I mean, we're seeing it drastically affect conferences in a huge way. So
yeah, especially the Big Ten, where it's a premier conference. And that leads me to my next question on, now there's a new college football playoff. After this year, we're going from 4-team playoff to 12-team playoff. How do you think these super conferences affect that 12-team playoff, and how many teams, like again with Nebraska, or take any other Big Ten team, you're playing UCLA, USC, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, and as a blue blood team like Nebraska, who has the name, we're going to play a lot of those teams each and every year. What kind of record can we have and still get into the college football playoff?
That's a really good question, right? When they announced this 12-team playoff last year, I had a lot of people on our channel over on the Gridiron Expert saying, this is stupid, it's horrible, we're going to get like a 3-loss team in the playoff, that's not what it's about. And I was okay with that. I think there are some good 3-loss teams that deserve, out of 12 teams, they deserve a shot, especially if your 3 losses, take Nebraska, for example. What if their 3 losses, say this year, were to I know they don't play all of them, but like a Michigan, an Ohio State, and a Penn State. What if those were the 3 losses?
And we beat USC and UCLA.
Right. Good wins. The losses aren't bad. You got to weigh it out evenly. I think the format's going to change, though. The powers that be haven't said anything about that yet. But before all this conference realignment happened, they were going to take the 12-team playoff. They were going to take every Power 5 conference champion.
Right. Automatic bids. Yeah.
Yeah.
You really had 6 automatic bids. Half of your playoff was going to be based on conference champions.
That ain't happening.
No way it's happening now.
Not a chance, right? You don't even have it. You don't even have the...
No, we don't even have 6. Yeah, I have 6 conferences.
Yeah, it's not a chance. So it's one of those things now. It's with 16 teams in the SEC, 18 teams in the Big Ten, 16 teams back in the Big 12, and the Pac-12 doesn't even exist anymore. ACC is still there, sure, but they'll dissipate within the next 5 years. They'll be gone. What do you do? Do you still hold the same format, or do you say, okay, we're going to take the top 2 from the Big Ten, top 2 from the SEC, ACC champ, Big 12 champ, and then a bunch of at-larges, which Nebraska could eventually fit into if they don't win the conference. So I think they can feasibly get in with 3 losses. I think 4 would be far-fetched, but 3 losses, depending on who they are too, of course, and depending on how the rest of the country shapes out, you're going to see a handful of 3-loss teams in the playoff next year, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing we talked about is I feel like there is almost an inevitability that over time the conference championships will disappear because they'll just feel like a redundant game that doesn't actually mean anything for the path to the championship, where both teams are going to be locked to get into the playoff either way. So what's the point of playing?
You're exactly right. It's what's the point of playing? And honestly, what you might end up seeing soon is how does the Big Ten, we'll stick with that, how does the Big Ten choose to structure an 18-team conference, right? I know in the SEC, they've discussed the possibility of pods. We got 4-team pods or something like that.
I mean, it's literally the NFL.
It's exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be like the NFL. And there's a possibility you have a playoff within a playoff. Like you have a Big Ten playoff that can get you a team or 2 into the college football playoff. And that's what happens with the SEC. That's people think that's far-fetched, but it's not entirely.
Do you see a world where it could get just to 2 super conferences where it really is just the Big Ten SEC battling it out for the
Super
national
Bowl
championship?
Right. Inevitably, if you want my honest opinion, I think we're going to come to the point where we have a split in college football where it's almost like, right now we're at the FBS level, which is great. I think you're going to have like this FBS level, which is all Big Ten, all SEC, your leader teams, and then more of the group of 5 teams that aren't good enough, lower level teams, just random teams like Florida International, Arkansas State, teams like that. They'll be in this separate division. Those guys might end up battling themselves for like the tier 2 championship, and then you have a playoff between the Big Ten and the SEC with like 2 conferences that'll consist of like 80 teams.
Yeah. Let's head on to narrowing it down just to Nebraska and talking about this season. Obviously, there's been moving parts all over the place across the whole conference, but especially with Nebraska, new head coach, new quarterback, new players all over the field. So let's each give out 1 or 2 or maybe 3. Let's see how crazy we get. Some guys that we really are excited about this year that could be breakouts, guys that could take Nebraska to the next level, guys that you're pumped to see play on the field, guys that you have questions about, but that have the upside to turn Nebraska into a 7, 8, 9, 10 win team in a season if they hit like this.
For a lot of people, the obvious answers would be Jeff Sims, right? I think a lot of people are just going to point straight to the quarterback, most important position in the field. But I won't go obvious, right? I'll stick on offense, though, and I'll give you Billy Kemp. I think that's an amazing pickup.
Yes.
Talk about transfers, right? I mean, Jeff Sims a transfer, Billy Kemp a transfer coming in from Virginia, guy who had over 1,700 reception yards and only 25 starts at Virginia. So that's a pretty impressive feat, right?
For a slot guy.
Yeah, for a slot guy, right? One of the best wide receivers to come through that football program, ranks 4th all-time in program history when it comes to receptions, 10th all-time in reception yards. So he's a guy that can create that separation. He's got great speed, could quickly become like one of the top targets for Jeff Sims, and to me, can quickly become a great replacement after the loss of Trey Palmer. So I'm not going to go out there and say that Billy Kemp comes in and gets 1,000 yards like Palmer did last year, but I think he's going to be one of the go-to targets for Jeff Sims, and it could end up being that X factor in a couple of games this year.
Yeah, I guess I was going to wonder, like, what do you feel like his ceiling is as a player? Could it be all conference with how difficult the competition is in the Big Ten, or like where do you see a guy like that in the slot, fitting in the conference picture?
I think it's going to depend on obviously how well he's utilized, but I would not say all conference is entirely far-fetched. I think if you're looking at, first team, second team all conference, I put him on the lower end, maybe a 3rd or 4th, He's not up there with some of those elite wide receivers that we've got. I mean, 3rd or 4th team is not far-fetched, honorable mention, somewhere in that lower range, but it's really going to come down to how Matt Rhule wants to come in and run this offense, right? Really more so how Marcus Satterfield wants to come in and run this offense. Are they going to come with that more balanced approach? How much do they utilize Jeff Sims in the run game? We know he's got that dual threat capability. And then, again, a lot of it hinges on Jeff Sims, and he's a good quarterback. I think with the right coaching, which he really didn't have much at Georgia Tech, he could really take that step forward. But he struggled with accuracy. He struggled with decision-making. The guy had, 23 interceptions, 30 touchdowns, 23 interceptions at Georgia Tech. So it's a matter of how much does he progress as a quarterback this year in this new system. That's going to kind of obviously affect Nebraska's season, but affect their wide receivers as well.
Yeah, well, I think one thing really quick, you mentioned Satterfield again as an SEC guy, again covering the whole. Josh and I kind of had some question marks about Satterfield compared to the other coordinators that Rhule brought in. How do you feel about Marcus Satterfield and his offense at South Carolina, and just where do you see him fitting in? Do you think he's a good fit? Do you think he could do well, or are you kind of on the fence?
No, I think it's a great fit, personally. I thought that was a really, really good hire by Matt Rhule. I mean, bringing in a guy, he's relatively young, obviously did really well at South Carolina last year with a transfer quarterback. I mean, he came in and got Spencer Rattler, and I still would put Spencer Rattler quite a bit above Jeff Sims right now. But all what he was able to do with South Carolina last year. The offense was firing on all cylinders. One that averaged close to or a little bit over 30 points per game last year, was relatively balanced, but wanted to throw the ball more so than they wanted to run. And it worked, right? I mean, they had great games against, and people want to, when you think of South Carolina from last year, people focus so much on those last couple of games. It was a much larger body of work prior to those 2 games at the end of the year. And South Carolina looked really, really good in those games. So, I mean, obviously, Shane Beamer continues to exceed expectations. But I think Satterfield is a really, really good fit here. This is the type of offense that you're going to need, an offensive mind you're going to need to contend in the Big Ten West, not just from keeping up with them offensively, but if you look at the West as a whole, Nebraska has an opportunity to have one of the better offenses in this division. I mean, Northwestern's not going to do it.
Purdue's questionable. Illinois is questionable.
Yeah, I don't know how sold I am on Luke Altmaier yet. Iowa has a new quarterback, which is great, but Nebraska has nothing out of the 7 teams in the division, has an opportunity to be top 3.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
All right, Caleb, who's your breakout player?
Man, there's so many I want to grab, but I think as captains of the Isaac Gifford fan club, I think it has to be him on taking another step. Isaac Gifford, he was one of the leaders in solo tackles for us. Matt Rhule has sung his praises throughout camp as a guy who's just doing everything right and taking it to the next level. Again, his brother had a really big jump as his senior year went on. Gifford has been a guy that, again, through the Scott Frost era as well, they trusted with big things early. They've wanted him to play this nickel position, and he has played the nickel position, which fits well with the Rover. And I think he's really going to be the cog that makes this defense go. We've heard our defense has been outperforming the offense thus far in camp, and I think that he is a star on the team. And I'm excited to see him take the jump. Again, Josh and I are big believers in Isaac Gifford this year. With all that the coaches have said about him, there's a lot of good reason why.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on board with that one. So I have no contention with Isaac Gifford being a breakout. We think he could be the best player on Nebraska this season, potentially, if he really does take that next level. So, I mean, for me, I'll go the complete opposite route. And a guy who, I mean, he might be the guy I'm most fascinated with to see in week 1 against Minnesota, because it looks like he's going to play. And he's a true freshman on the defensive line. And that's Princeville Uman-Milan as a true freshman. And he played in the spring game, and he was laying the wood on Jeff Sims in that spring game. And in a game where they were allowed to hit the quarterbacks, which is shocking for a first-year head coach to allow something like that to happen, especially with the quarterback situation. But regardless, Princeville has looked great the whole year, and I'm just hoping to see him 15, 20 snaps in this game would be exciting, and seeing what he can do with something that, as a true freshman in a Big Ten game to start the season, woo! I mean, I want to see if the hype's real, and I really do think it might be, considering the burst that we saw in the spring game and the effective tackling already in open space in his first game as a Husker, which was a spring game. So overall, I'm really excited about what Princeville could be, especially in the back half of the season.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent pick. And, I kid you not, I had Isaac Gifford on here.
Welcome to the fan club.
Welcome, man. Welcome aboard.
Happy to be here. I love it. I was like, I had a couple offensively, had a couple defensively. Gifford was in bold. So, happy to hear that I, was an honorary member before I even knew about it. So that's great. I love it. The defensive line was great. I think what you said about that's important, right? Not only Prince, but just also some of the impacts of the transfers as well. You got Chief Borders coming in. You got Elijah Judy coming in. Both from SEC programs as well, Florida and Texas A&M. Ty Robinson was already there up front as well. So I think if there's an area of concern for me for Nebraska defensively, it's up front. It's on that defensive line. Yep. 21 sacks last year isn't going to cut it.
And you lost your 3 best pass rushers.
Exactly. And you got to stop the run. I mean, 189 rushing yards per game last year is
it was
Don't
brutal.
remind us.
How does that work? How do you fix the guys up front? So I mean, you mentioned Prince, mentioned a couple there. That's probably the biggest storyline I'm watching outside of the new quarterback play with Jeff Sims. It's offense, I'm looking at quarterback. Defense, I'm looking at the defensive line.
I mean, normally it's not a good sign when you're talking about a breakout player being a true freshman defensive lineman, but that's where we're at. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to
future.
It. Yeah.
Building
for development, guys. It's all about getting the talent and develop them. Exactly. Yeah.
So, let's dive into the Minnesota game. Yeah. I mean, here we are, so close to college football.
If you haven't heard,
we cannot wait for this game next Thursday. I can't believe it. It's already here. I mean, as football lovers and savants, we're so excited to get into this game. How do you feel that Matt Rhule is going to do under the lights in a Big Ten game on the road, first game? What do you see
PJ Fleck
rowing the boat?
Rowing the boat to another 8-9 win season, right? Can't get over the hump to that Big Ten championship. But what a way to start, honestly, for Matt Rhule, right? It's good and bad, right? You're going to see a Nebraska team going up against a quality opponent. So there's not going to be any sugarcoating. This is a great opportunity for the team as a whole, for Matt Rhule as a whole. Minnesota, I mean, you guys know they've won 4 straight against Nebraska. Nebraska's come very, very close the last 3 years, all decided by a touchdown.
Very, very far.
Scott, one could say we won those games and Scott Frost threw them away, but
that's probably the best way of putting it. I think that's a fair way. Yeah, don't put blame on the one guy, which he deserves a lot of blame for sure. Yeah. But I look at Minnesota as a whole here. This is a team that has questions of their own, which is it's going to benefit Nebraska. I mean, that's they're breaking in a new quarterback of their own. Nathan Kaliak-Manis played some last year towards the end of the year, but obviously this is his first opportunity as a full-time starter, first time leading this offense for a whole
pressure.
And a lot of pressure. It's a conference game. I mean, that's huge first and foremost. The pressure is on as both these teams are going to try to compete for a division title, which the Big Ten West, for me, sure, it's Wisconsin, Iowa towards the top, but it's still relatively wide open, with the exception of Northwestern and Purdue right now, in my eyes. But, I think this is going to be a team that's actually going to come out, Nebraska. I think they're going to come out and surprise a lot of people. What I'm really looking forward to seeing, give me 2 drives on both sides of the ball, right? So first 2 drives offensively, first 2 drives defensively. I think you're going to see a completely different look. I think you're going to see a different energy. I think you're going to see a different, just passion and from these players. Nebraska the last couple of years you guys know it. You watch them obviously closer and more than I have been able to do. But when I've seen them, starts off with all this optimism. And as soon as, something doesn't go their way, whether it's a poor onside kick decision against Northwestern.
Oh, no.
That's nice of you.
You throw a pick, you make a horrible mistake, you do whatever, hasn't been able to get over that hump, right? They haven't been able to recover.
They don't know how to win.
Yeah, they don't know how to win. There's been a block there. There's a mental block there. And that's going to change very quickly. And you will see that because there will be mistakes made against Minnesota, no doubt. But that whole mindset is going to shift quite a bit. And I think you're going to see, I think it's going to be very noticeable in that first week. So I've got more on that, but I'll let y'all debrief for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. I think we both agree with you. We're both pretty confident what Matt Rhule's done with the team from a confidence standpoint, from a mindset standpoint. He's obviously instilled his culture. He's let guys go off the team like Miles Farmer, who was a legit starter, but he just wasn't doing it Matt Rhule's way and said, all right, if you're not going to fit in, you're going to be gone. And we talked about this before, but it does feel like Matt isn't putting all the pressure on this season. He knows it's year one. He knows that it's going to take some time. I mean, even like he was on Colin Cowherd just recently, and Colin was like, so like, you're going to do this year? And he's like, I'm not smart enough to do it in year one. It's literally what he said. So like, I mean, the expectation
and he said, but it's, exactly. I love that quote. He said, but is it my year one or is it the seniors' year 4? They have an opportunity to take and win these games. And I love just the framing, like the difference, the shift from Scott Frost, who, again, we have to win that first game in Northwestern. We put so much stock in it. And that's how he weighed that game last year compared to, we just want to earn the right to step on the field with Matt Rhule. And again, even with the Mickey change from Scott Frost, again, we went to live tackling. And I love Nebraska's been posting these behind the scenes, a look in. And Terrence Knighton said in this last video to the defense, you don't have to be talented to be physical. And that's something that, again, we even saw a difference halfway last season, how much better our defense got just by live tackling, by doing that. And again, not being afraid to have Jeff Sims go live reps in the spring game, take hits. And I think that's something that just Nebraska football has missed. We are known, again, bringing back to 80s and 90s for being tough football players, and that's been Nebraska's go-to since the 1890s. This isn't an easy place to live. Our literal state motto is it's not for everyone. It's cold, it's hot, it's humid, and embracing that toughness is going to be a huge difference for Nebraska. And I can't wait to see that this year. And again, it doesn't take talent to be physical.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, going back to your point about Bo Pelini and the energy that he brought, I mean, there was a definite change when Mike Riley was hired and into Frost. We went from being a team that was feared, or a defense that was feared, to being the one who was living in fear. We were fearing. And I think part of that is what Rhule is just trying to rip that Band-Aid off, is like, we're not going to be worried if Jeff Sims gets hurt in a spring game. We're not going to be worried if one guy goes down, because we have confidence that the next guy is going to step up and be just as good. Yeah. So I think all of those things are refreshing in Nebraska, because we haven't seen it in almost a decade now.
You can't live in fear, right? I mean, that's a recipe for a loss right there. If you play timid, if you play scared, if you play too conservative with way too much time left, that you're going to lose the game. And that's going to end up reflecting in your players.
Or you feel like you have to kick an onside kick to close them out when they're Northwestern, who went 1-11.
Where'd you get these examples? I wonder.
Just made them up.
Not specific.
Like, imagine if that happened in Madden. Wouldn't that be crazy?
Right. But you're 100% right, though. We talked about it earlier in the show, where we talk about it now, it's a culture shift. And I like what you said too about Matt Rhule. It's one of those things where you look at Matt Rhule and people's their preseason expectation for Nebraska going into this year. It's a new coach. It's a rebuilding year. This is not a rebuilding year, right? Matt Rhule inherits a really good situation that I don't think a lot of people outside of Nebraska realize. What they're going to look at is they're going to look at the struggles from last year, the struggles from the year before, how bad they were under Scott Frost, and go, man, Nebraska's got this huge uphill climb. Look at how bad they were in recent years. Do people realize that they're 7-17 the last 2 years, but 13 of the 17 losses are by one possession? Do people know that? I mean,
Nebraska fans.
We do, because they've been heartbreaking.
best 3-9 team in history. I mean, we know that.
Yeah. Our badge.
That's the badge. Hang a banner. But, it's one of those things where this is not a typical rebuilding. The talent's been there for Nebraska, right? What's been missing has been the leadership. It's been the mental toughness. It's been the physical toughness. What's been missing has been a culture of winning and a culture of we are able to win these games. We were able to do it our way and still come out on top and not cater to anybody else. We are Nebraska football, and we're going to play Nebraska football. We don't care what anybody else has to say about it. That's been missing.
Wrapping this all back into Minnesota, I mean, PJ Fleck is also a guy who leads by example. He leads with that culture. So heading into this Minnesota game, a clashing of two coaches who have their style and a very specific style. Like, what do you feel like are the X factors leading into this game, or things that are going to decide a game in Minneapolis like this?
Yeah, that's another good question, right? I think first and foremost, it's Nebraska's defense against the run, not just running backs, but Ethan Kaliak-Manis can run. Can that defensive line, that front seven even, can they collapse the pocket, make sure Kaliak-Manis doesn't escape it?
We were the first team to learn that last year.
We were winning the game, and then Tanner Morgan went down,
and then Tyler
Nathan just cooked us.
Yeah, and then Ty Robinson laid it into Tanner Morgan, and all 320 pounds of Ty went right into him.
Not a way I'd want to go, that's for sure.
No.
Well, that's the big thing, right? You've got to find a way to shut that down. And Minnesota's got a great running back. You know, they lose Mohamed Ibrahim, which was a huge loss, but Sean Tyler coming in from Western Michigan is phenomenal. 2 1,000-yard seasons, rushed over 2,000 yards during his time at Western Michigan. He's going to fit in perfectly with Minnesota's offense. So you've got a dual threat quarterback. You've got a good enough running back. You've got your top 2 receivers coming back. This Minnesota offense is going to be better than people realize. I think it's really going to test this Nebraska defense probably more than they want to be tested in the first game of the year. So I think that's X factor number 1. I think X factor number 2 is, you've talked about it a couple of times, is that physical toughness, right? More specifically, that offensive line for Nebraska. Minnesota's defense was 4th in the country last year overall, allowed less than 2 touchdowns per game, under 14 points per game. If Nebraska's offensive line is up to par, Jeff Sims is going to be running for his life. I want to see Jeff Sims run. I want to see him be mobile. I don't want to see it because he's constantly under pressure.
But luckily with Minnesota, that was their one flaw in their defense. Their secondary was great. Their pass rush was kind of subpar, which is surprising. And so hopefully that stays down, and they lost guys on that. So hopefully that is a weakness that Nebraska can exploit this year. And I am definitely worried about their secondary, but I'm hoping with their pass rush, that's a spot where maybe we're going to get some more Jeff Sims time in the pocket than we will in other Big Ten opponents.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, that's what you need, right? With a new quarterback, with a new system, you need that time to come in there, go through your progressions, and make the right decisions, right? Especially on the road, too. Do
they get the win on the road, or are the Gophers victorious?
Yeah, man, give it to us. What do you got?
Well, I hate doing this on your own show, but I'm picking Minnesota. I'm picking Minnesota to get the win. If it's any consolation, I am picking them to beat Colorado the next week. So,
hey, we appreciate that.
Make it 1-1. I'm not high on Colorado at all. This game's close, though, right? Minnesota's not mopping the floor with Nebraska. It's going to be, you got this game on Thursday night. You've got Florida and Utah on Thursday night. Both those games have the opportunity to be very relatively low-scoring games, hard-fought, physical games. That's what we're looking for, right? And I think if you're Nebraska, you want to win the game, sure, but if you're going to take anything, if you lose, I hope I'm wrong. You lose the game. What you're hoping to take away is a much better look and effort than you saw last year. And at times last year, you saw it, right? There were flashes of brilliance, 100%. Right. But what you're hoping to see is you're hoping to see some physicality on both sides of the ball, mental toughness, a solid debut from Jeff Sims. If you can get all those 3 things in there and you lose a 1-possession game, it's heartbreaking, sure. But to me, that would give me a lot of optimism heading into what's going to be. You got 11 more games after that. I
mean, that was one thing we talked about, like in the video yesterday. Was we put out our Minnesota predictions, and unfortunately, we did also predict us to lose the game.
Yes.
But what I want to do, I do want to know is, what are your thoughts on the narratives for Nebraska's upside when it comes to winning this game, and then translating that into success this season? For you, what's the upside narrative to beat Minnesota? Like, what will it take?
Well, it's going to take, like we said earlier, it's going to take stopping the run. Ethan Kaliak-Manis is a good quarterback, but they call him the Greek gunslinger, right? He's got an arm on him. Outside of that, what can he do as a full-time starter now? That's going to be the biggest thing. Nebraska's secondary is good, right? Nebraska's got a very solid secondary, and that's the thing. If they can bottle up that run game, I think Kaliak-Manis is going to be in for a tougher day throwing than he wants it to be, than people think it's going to be. Because Nebraska's secondary, Matt Rhule, one of his specialties has been, everywhere he's been, has been solid defenses, has been solid secondaries. I think that's going to translate to Lincoln, no doubt about it. So You stop that run, contain them. I mean, you have 189 yards per game, rushing yards per game last year. You hold Minnesota to under 120 on the day. I think it's a recipe for a win. I really do. You contain that, you've got a solid chance to win that game if you hold it under 120 rushing yards. And additionally, on top of that, offensively, is you've got to find a way to create balance. Nebraska's got a very similar, right now, layout offensively to Minnesota. You've got a new quarterback, but one that is mobile. And Nebraska, to me, has a pretty underrated running back core as well. I think we're kind of focused on the new pieces at wide receiver. We're focused on the addition of Jeff Sims, but you've got Gabe Ervin, you've got Anthony Grant, you've got guys in that backfield that have proven themselves. And I think we're just kind of choosing to forget about it. So the talent's there across the board where
they're not flashy, man. They're not the Sean Tyler transfers. You know?
They don't got the mixtape like that.
how dare they stick around at their program and not transfer?
Yeah, how dare they, right?
But I'm telling you, I think you come in with a relatively balanced approach. This is an offense that 123 rushing yards per game last year. Not a horrible mark. Wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what you needed. It was quarterback play that was consistently up and down. Never really found that consistency there. You find a way to put that together, and you're going to give Minnesota and that really strong Minnesota defense a tougher test than people think.
Agreed. I mean, that was one, I think probably the biggest thing for us in this game was going to be play action and utilizing tight ends. One of the most interesting players for us, one that we could have easily mentioned in the breakout episode was Thomas Fidone, who was the number one ranked tight end 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. There's an opportunity here for Fidone to be that breakout player too. And I think that's one of the huge upside narratives for this team heading into the season, especially against Minnesota, a team that we could attack, especially around that first down marker across the middle of the field, especially if we have some success running the ball, because then suddenly you're opening up the field with play action, and who knows what can happen with so many missing pieces or new pieces in the secondary for Minnesota. It's basically Tyler Nubin, and then at that point you're like, who else do they got? So there's opportunity.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, I think you said it perfectly too. You run to set up the pass, right? Rhule is, I mean, he's a mastermind. I'm going to give him credit there. I mean, he knows what he's doing, right? I mean, he's a program builder. He's done it everywhere he's been, and he knows exactly what he's doing. I think the beauty of the play action too in this scenario is, sure, they launch it downfield to the tight ends, but also when you roll out you got a bootleg.
Get him moving.
Yeah, you sell that enough, then you do that and you pull the play action, you roll out to your right like it's going to be a bootleg, and then you chunk it deep. I mean, the possibilities offensively are endless with the personnel that Nebraska has right now.
One of the biggest issues that both of us had last season with Nebraska's offense was just our really frustrating utilization of Casey Thompson, especially against teams who have a great pass rush. Mark Whipple, he's a good offensive coordinator when he has the right players in the right system in the right situation, but he's not one who adjusts well. He didn't adjust well to some of these best defenses, and we saw that with Casey Thompson. It's like, we're not dumping the ball off. We're not rolling him out. We're not bumping up at the line of scrimmage. We're not giving Casey any help here, and he's getting lit up and getting hurt in these games. So for me, I think that's also an interesting aspect for Satterfield and for Rhule here is I think they're going to be a little bit better at adjusting to these Big Ten defenses. They're going to have a few more cards up their sleeve in the second half, and that was something that Scott Frost was notoriously bad at, was halftime adjustments. So I think there's some really interesting changes here and some upside narratives for the potential in this Minnesota game.
On that awesome note of Nebraska, how many years is it going to take for Nebraska to get back to the national championship stage? And then, yes, plug your channel, my friend.
Nebraska versus Arkansas. When is it happening?
Pretty sure that was like the 1964 national championship, the last time Arkansas won a title. So, you know, I would do anything for some deja vu, baby. I would probably sell my soul to see that. But give me like over under 20 years.
Okay.
Maybe we can get Nebraska back up there. I think when you get the right guy in place, and I think Rhule can be that guy. The beauty of this too, that I'll do the plug of the channel. I know Matt Rhule, Nebraska is a place where coaches, you're not going to want to leave Nebraska, right? With the level of this program, the history behind this program, this is not a stepping stone. This is not I'm leaving Nebraska for a better opportunity.
He's top 10 paid as well.
I mean, the pay is going to be good. The history's there. The tradition's there. If you can succeed, you can be there for really as long as you want. Write your ticket, in theory. But as soon as you start struggling a little bit, your seat's getting really warm. So I think if Matt Rhule can come in here and succeed relatively quickly, opportunity to build. One thing Nebraska's got going for them, one thing Matt Rhule's got going for them, even though it's only 1 year, continuity. They're going to say, look, yeah, Oregon, Washington, USC, they're all coming in here. They don't know how to play in the Midwest, right? We do. I know I've only been here a year, but it's 1 year longer than these guys have been there. We know the region. We know how to play Big Ten style of ball. Pac-12, they've got nothing on us, and that's going to be something that really benefits them down the road. So over under 20 years, Nebraska, I not just saying it's come on the show, genuinely believe it's going to be back relatively soon. Like, I think it's going to be a lot quicker than people realize.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, that's what we want to hear. So that's why we brought you here, was to say that exact sentence.
Appreciate you guys having me on for sure. This has been a blast. Big fan of you guys. For everybody else watching, the Gridiron Expert here on YouTube. It's Gridiron Expert on Twitter. We haven't been as active there lately, but we're going to be more active as the season goes on. But go check us out. Like they said at the beginning, we cover all of college football, every team, all the games, biggest storylines. We do live streams as well. We're doing live streams every Tuesday at 7. Weekly predictions, game of the weeks, spread picks over on the gridironexpert.com. Sign up for those expert picks. I'm telling you, we've beat out over 80% of the national handicappers the last 5 years.
Woo.
We are one of the best handicappers in the country, and we will stand by that. So we got a lot of stuff over on the channel. So go check us out. Subscribe to us. We're trying to hit 12,000 here by the next couple of weeks. So we appreciate any of the support that you guys can throw our way.
Yeah. Alex, thank you so much for being on the channel. Yeah, it's a pleasure. We've loved seeing your channel grow beside ours as the years have gone along on YouTube. To our Big Red Homestead people, we launched our Patreon and Discord. Very exciting for us. We're launching more content, exclusive videos on Big Red Homestead.
And the Discord is open to everyone, so anyone can join the Discord. So definitely do that. It's not just for supporters. So everyone get in there. We're trying to play fantasy football. Discord.
We got news, tweets, everything. Husker news. And as always, guys, this has been Big Red Homestead. I'm Caleb. That's Josh. And that is Gridiron Expert, a.k.a. Alex, a.k.a. your main guy for all of college football news. We will see you next time. Go Big Red.
Go Big Red, baby.